Welcome everybody to the Ask It Basket, Rico 12 Ask It Basket with Robert Pardon and lovely old me, Justin B, your host. And I'm just really grateful to be here today. It's just me and Robert today. Our co contributor Michelle is unable to be with us today, so we're a little bit more rough around the edges than we are when she's around. But we're just happy to be here and go through this process with the Ask It Basket. And what we do here is we just bring questions that have been brought to Robert and Michelle and just come to us for Robert to really expound on, share his experience, strength, and hope about these questions that he hears in recovery facilities and different places, and questions that I honestly bring to us also here. So in this conversation, we're just excited to get into it. Robert, before we get started, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in your life.
Oh, gosh. My name is Robert, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. And when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous back in February of 1986, I had all sorts of things clinging to me, as one could imagine, living in Las Vegas. I'd lived there for almost 7 years before I found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous through a treatment center. And by that time, Justin, as you're well aware of my story, Gamblers Anonymous, my first 12-step meeting was GA. But being addicted to pornography, I never met a strip club I didn't like, or, gambling and sexual addiction and compulsive overeating, obviously drugs, you name it. I was throwing up 3 times a day. So I qualified for OA, NA, SA, GA, AA, NA, you name it. If there was an A, I could raise my hand and say, my name is Robert, I'm a compulsive overeater. My name is Robert, and I'm a sex addict. I could name, I would feel comfortable anywhere because I had a story that would qualify me as a person who needed God to do for me what I could not do for myself. And today, Justin, I'm sober 14,081 days. Isn't that crazy?
Man.
And we were talking about it off air. And when I was 32, when I first came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't think I was going to live to be 33, let alone 32 and a half. And today I'm 70 years old, and I'm at that stage in life where it's legacy building, and you're such a big part of that. You are such a good friend of mine, even though you're primarily SA, predominantly SA, and I'm AA. We meet in the middle because getting well transcends why you're sick. If we wanted to, we could allow the differences between us to keep us apart, yet we would miss out on the recovery. So we don't see eye to eye on a minute apart, but none of that matters, because what we do agree on is what restores us to sanity, gives us our family back, gives us a life that we never thought we would live again. And if you'd have told me 38 years ago that I would be here in life today, I'd have laughed and wondered, if you were going to share with me whatever you were smoking or drinking, right?
Oh, Robert, this is good stuff. And I love that. I love the multidisciplinary addicts that you and I can easily identify as, and the common solution that is there. I love how the big book talks about the we're as passengers on a steamliner, and you can probably quote it word for word. I'm just giving it here. But when we've been rescued from certain disaster, we come together as a fellowship that just sticks around. It's where unlikely bedfellows hang around. Any other thoughts on that, Robert?
You know what? Just to expand on that, because that is my favorite page of the big book. That's page 17. And it says, unlike the feeling of the ship's passengers, however, our joy and escape from disaster does not subside as we go our own individual ways. And then it talks about that could have not held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact is that we have discovered a common solution. So whether they're the 12 steps of SA, the 12 steps of AA, the 12 steps of Al-Anon, 12 steps are 12 steps. You change the word in the beginning, but your journey, Justin, is my journey. You have to admit you are powerless. I had to admit I'm powerless. I had to admit I was insane. You had to admit you were pretty nuts too. We both had to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood it. We both had to do a searching fearless moral inventory. We both had to do step 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And guess what? You and I live simultaneously in steps 10, 11, and 12. So even though we have a different primary concern, our recovery is the same. And that's where it says we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. And oh gosh, I just love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and anything recovery minded.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm just grateful to be trudging along in this brotherly and harmonious action that we are striving to do in steps 10 through 12 daily, Robert. And I love all the other people who do who are trudge buddies too. So I've got a couple questions for you. And you asked me about something that we'll get to in a little bit. You asked me to come up to this here, but I think I want to lead into that with a couple of other things that may come into that. Well, let's start with this disciplinary addiction type thing. You know, we talk about process addictions. We talk about substance abuse addictions. As you talk to people in treatment centers or anybody or anywhere else, how do you differentiate that as you speak to people? How do you help people feel like, hey, we are on this same boat together, when maybe there's others that saying, hey, you don't belong in this room because of that, or you don't belong in this room because of this? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, that's a great question, but because boy, do Michelle and I run across that on a regular basis, and so do you in your work and recovery, and many others do as well. Um, you know, I think like anything else, we have to attack what is the foundation of our addiction, of our behavioral challenge. So if a person comes in and says, every time I act out sexually, I want to drink, or every time I lose a paycheck, I want to use drugs. Well, there's a connection. This is my opinion. There's a connection, but there's a primary. The secondary, my secondary and tertiary and so on were alcohol and drugs. They're interrelated, but I would always want to go because I was so failed in relationships, and alcohol caused me to isolate more. Even though I'd be in a crowd, I'd go to strip clubs. I'd go to Larry's Villa. I'd entertain women that I shouldn't be entertaining, and so they would. My sexual addiction was a result of my alcoholism. And I had to find out, and I hope this answers your question, I had to find out what my primary, like I was throwing up 3 times a day. I didn't stop throwing up till I was 18 months sober. I didn't stop going to strip clubs until I was like 14 months sober. Because after a while, things aren't consistent with the lifestyle you think you have. So if you acting out sexually makes you want to drink or do drugs or feel so hopeless you'll want to go paycheck or overeat and then go throw up, then address the sexual addiction first, and then the other things will not be consistent with the lifestyle you chose. Now, this is providing that a person is working the steps, right? So I want to clear away the wreckage of my past, the entire wreckage, not selective wreckage, but the entire wreckage. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think it makes a lot of sense. How does one who is just foggy brained in whatever their addiction is, but they've got all these different secondary, tertiary things that are going on. How does one drill down to identify, here is the root addiction that I need to address first so that they can get to the solution, and the other stuff should start falling off the tree?
That's a great question because, and I'm not sure what their medical title would be, but the men and women in the medical field who help you understand what you're allergic to do the same thing. So I don't know that I'm allergic to strawberries. I just know I have a large allergic reaction. I like a lot of different fruit. And so what they'll do is by subtraction, they'll say, okay, now remove this, now remove that. Are you still allergic? Are you still acting out? Are you still? So a lot of times it's trial and error because we're so screwed up. Oh my God. I mean, being restored to sanity, my goodness, every single one of us that I've ever met in the room, we were we acted out before we got insane. We don't understand our insanity until we're sober. That's when, my life is going good, and now I want to burn my life to the ground one more time. That's absurd. But that's a mark of insanity. And so I think little by little, does this work? Does that work? Not everyone who comes in the rooms is alcoholic. They could have a gambling addiction that once they solve their gambling, then they don't want to drink the way they do or do other destructive things. So a lot of times it's trial and error. So what I'll ask a person is there ever been a time where you successfully drank? Because I run across this a lot with drug addicts, right? They'll say, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an addict. And I'll go up to them after the meeting, and it'll be AA, and I'll say, do you drink? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, well, why don't you drink? Well, every time I drink, it causes me depression. And when I get depressed, I want to use drugs. So you have a desire to stop drinking. And they say, well, of course I do. I don't drink. So, well, then when you're here, identify as an alcoholic, because you have a desire to stop drinking. That's the only requirement for membership. And the same requirement for membership transcends the various groups that we're involved with. I have a problem with pornography only when I drink, right? And
Right.
so I've been sober for a long time. And after a while, I've learned as a man how to avert my eyes, and it's not to say that women aren't attractive. I just don't spend time undressing them in public while I'm standing in the line at Target, right? Because it's not consistent, it's not cohesive with the lifestyle I've chosen. And I think we have to, by trial and error, find out what is really triggering the other responses, because after a while, there's not enough gambling that's not going to work. There's not enough compulsive overeating. I'm going to need to add something to make my feel good feel good. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you for walking through that, Robert. I really appreciate it. So let's go to the next step on this. Let's say that I believe I identify my core addiction. I start attending AA, for example. I start working the steps. I start really diving deep on things, and I get sober, and my life starts straightening out a bit. But then I'm not emotionally sober. I'm a dry drunk, as they may put it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an untreated alcoholic. Have you ever experienced that in your life, being a dry drunk? And if so, how do you pull yourself out of it, Robert?
Oh, wow. I was a dry drunk until I relapsed at 71 days. And this is where you talked about, leading into our conversation, the fellowship. I wanted to be like you so much because I knew I couldn't be like the family members because they couldn't identify with me any more than I could identify with them. Why doesn't that bother you? Why does that bother you? And so on. So the rooms of AA and NA and SA and OA and all the other GA that I attended, there was a point of identification. And the more stories I heard, and I thought, okay, you're here, I'm there. How did you get there? Because I don't want to be here. It says, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery, right? They're not telling me what to do. They're telling me what they did, right? There's a big
Right.
distinction there. At the end of the day, I'm my own free agent. I can do whatever I want to do. I've proven that, through marriages and through
Right.
jobs and through paychecks and through losing houses, losing cars, losing self-esteem, losing family members. I knew how to be how I was. I didn't know how to be how I wanted to be. And so I had to learn. And I think if anyone's experiencing that, to you and me and to Michelle and to others, it's pretty obvious why. I tell people all the time, I know why you're sober and I know why you want to go drink. It's not because I'm really smart, but rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. So what part of the path aren't you thoroughly following? Now, that doesn't mean that once I stop drinking, once I stop acting out, once I stop gambling, my life gets perfectly better. There's a price that I have to pay for the trajectory I created, right? It takes a while to turn that ship around. But little by little, I correct and I correct and I correct. And that's one of the reasons, Justin, I still have a sponsor. There are things that occur in my life, and I'll go to Will and I'll say, hey, how did you handle this? You know, how do you cope with that? How, because the ego's job is to convince us it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So I need a series of checks and balances along the way to make sure that I'm not ego driven, that I'm accountable. And I'm still accountable after 38 years, 6 months, and how many days that is, right? I'm still accountable. I'm accountable to my wife. I'm accountable to my sponsor. I'm accountable to you. Um, our friendship is so deep that if you saw something going wrong in me, you'd say, "Hey, I seen your post. I seen this. What's going on, man?" You know. And I
Yeah.
think, and I think over time, when we're willing to do that, we no longer, because we flip the script in the beginning. We get sober, no matter what the behavior or addiction is to a substance. We get sober because we don't like the life that we lived as a result of that addiction. We turn the tables on it where we stay sober because we love the life it has given us. And that only, in my opinion, that only comes through the steps, you know, and whether it's SAOA, NAGA, you name the A, the only alternative suggestion is, oh, you don't think you're an alcoholic? You don't think you act out sexually? Go try it a few times and see how well your life does as an unfiltered and unfettered user.
Hmm. Yeah. So we've talked about several things around. I think what this question that you said, hey, I'd like to address this topic with you, but I'd like to address that here. So talk to us a little bit about selective sobriety and what that means to you. What's your take on selective sobriety? Let's define it and then go through that.
It's a term I just made up that probably somebody already made up. I just haven't heard it before. And it came from a meeting I was in where a person took a 30-day chip, and I found out after the meeting that they were still smoking dope. And to me, my sponsor and other people have been sober longer than me, and even some, like Jason Trimble, my good buddy, we talked about it, and it's called a marijuana maintenance program. So especially in the terms of addiction to a substance, I sober is sober. Sober means clean and sober, no mind altering chemicals. When I tell you I'm recovered, I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Um, it was important to me for you to look at my life and see that I wasn't gambling anymore. That wasn't using drugs, that I wasn't going in the strip clubs. I used to travel a lot, and men that I'd hang out with, they'd say, "Oh, let's go over to this club or that club." And I'd say, "No, I'm going back to my hotel," because I didn't want to engage in that. Could I have done it and stayed sober? I don't know. All I know is I said no because it wasn't consistent with my life. So what happens, especially in a cross-addicted environment, we make excuses for why we have reasons for why we do what we do, and we have excuses for why we do what we shouldn't do. And there's such a thing as a slippery slope. So if I know that a person is not clean and sober, they're selecting what they consider sobriety. They're selecting what they consider being clean and sober, and especially is predominant in the substance abuse, in the alcohol and drugs. To me, you can't pick and choose. Eventually, if this person doesn't get honest, they're going to drink again, because at some point, marijuana is not going to be enough. At some point, they're trusting self rather than the finite God. You and I, as men of God, and Michelle, who trusts God with her whole heart, and others that we know, we rely on God to do for us what we can't do for ourselves. We're not relying on the cashier at Walmart or Target who's attractive. We're not looking at that 20-year-old thinking she can fix me. And I can look at her as long as I'm not acting out, as long as I'm not going to a website or whatever. And we start making allowances for why we aren't trusting God, but we're trusting our flesh, we're trusting our substance. And that is a very slippery slope. Now, that person has every right to take a 30-day chip, but I have every right to be upset. Not upset. I am upset. I'm upset because the sanctity of recovery is at stake as long as this person thinks they can get up. And I asked him, I said, did you tell people that you were still using? Did you, you want to be honest, did you tell them? No, you probably didn't, because if they'd have known, they probably wouldn't have given you a chip, And I told him, I said, at some point, you're going to have to be honest with yourself, because honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, we know, Justin, we know that is the foundation to recovery. Admitting I'm powerless over sexual addiction, over drugs, over alcohol, over overeating, over you name it, gambling, I'm powerless over that. And if I'm powerless, that means I'm turning that part over to a power greater than myself. Anything less than that, Jason, I'm going to relapse. Justin, I'm going to relapse. I've seen it too many times.
Yeah. So I'm going to push back a little bit, not from myself, but I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody else. Let's say somebody who is their primary addiction is cocaine, for example. And they have a glass of wine with dinner or whatever. Tell me the difference, or is there a difference between what we just talked about there and what I just shared there? Someone in CA who has a glass of wine with dinner.
Well, they can do whatever they want to do at dinner. I'm not paying their dinner bill, but have them go to NA and take a chip and let people know that they've had a glass of wine over dinner. In NA, they're not really that nice at all. And they would snatch that chip, say, hey, you're not clean and sober, dude, or dudette. You're not clean and sober. And until you're clean and sober, and if people knew, they would try to help them. Now, people can do whatever they want to do, right, in their own personal life. And I don't begrudge that. Matter of fact, I don't think every person who has a problem with cocaine has a problem with alcohol. As long as it doesn't trigger more drinking or more drug use, knock yourself out. Do what you do you, right? I'm just saying, don't take a chip under the pretenses of being sober if you're not sober. That's all I'm saying.
No, that's interesting, and it's powerful. I think that it's something that is probably turning on a lot of lights in people's dark recesses of their minds. Let's talk process addiction. Let's talk sexaholism, for example. Say that the person is sober, they're not acting out, they're abiding by the black and white definition of sobriety within SA, for example, of SA's definition, and yet, like what you talked about, maybe at the grocery store they're lingering and visually undressing somebody at the grocery store or whatever. Is that the same thing as selective sobriety? Is that where you're going? Is that the direction you're going with this?
Yes and no. I think Father Martin said it best in Chalk Talk. He said, alcohol has a way of putting to sleep things that would otherwise make us uncomfortable. So if I'm standing in that line and I've had a couple glasses of wine, or let's say I'm in a restaurant and I Uber, right? So I'm not breaking the law, not doing anything wrong. I'm Ubering there and Ubering back because I know I'm a cup of cocktails. And all of a sudden, I'm three or four, wine is, alcohol's not my problem, or so I think, right? And so I'm 2 martinis deep, right? Nothing wrong with that. I can go home. I can go up to work tomorrow. I can do fine. But all of a sudden, that female server or male server, whatever your attraction is, starts to look a little bit good. And you're thinking, I wonder how they would look. You know how it goes, man. We've been in the same boat.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we think, man, I wonder what she looks like under that dress. And if I wasn't drinking, I would never think that of her. I would respect her. I would respect her intimacy, her privacy, her integrity. I would just look at her as a professional trying to feed her 2.3 kids or whatever her situation is. I would just respect that. But if alcohol gets me to think in a way that I wouldn't think if I hadn't had alcohol, then I should have a desire not to drink. So if I go to my sponsor and I said, hey, Justin, I want you to know that I've been doing really good in my sobriety. We're working on step 8 and 9 together. And I just want you to know that I had a couple drinks, and all of a sudden, that food server was doing more than bringing me my steak. I wanted her to bring me more, right? You should say to me, Robert, maybe you shouldn't drink. Maybe your consumption of alcohol or cocaine or whatever brings a side of you that you and I are trying to recover from. Have you ever thought about not drinking? Well, I would say, well, I've been in restaurants before and I haven't drank and I haven't thought that way. What's the difference? Well, the difference is alcohol. Again, Father Martin says alcohol puts us asleep those things that make us feel uncomfortable. And if drinking makes me feel comfortable with undressing my food server or anyone else, then I probably shouldn't drink.
Yeah,
But if I select that, if I say, well, at least I didn't sleep with her, at least I didn't give her my number, that's what we're calling about selective sobriety. I didn't do this, therefore I'm okay. Well, you do that other enough, and there will come a point where you're fantasizing while you're with your wife or your significant other. All of a sudden, I've got that picture in my mind now. We know how sex addiction works. I mean, Lord knows I do. And all of a sudden, that seed was planted. Now I don't even need alcohol to trigger that memory of that 19-year-old bus girl with the short skirt. I've got her undressed in bed with me while I'm with my wife or girlfriend or what have you. You can see how that can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a slippery slope. So, and I want to go there for just a minute. So, Robert, you're 38 years plus sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and and these other co-addictions, these other fruits of that addiction have generally fallen off the tree as you've moved along. Do you still experience craving today for alcohol or for any of those things?
No, quite the contrary, because Laura drinks. Most everyone who knows me knows that. And most everyone who knows her knows that. And I mix her cocktail every night. I'm very fortunate getting sober in Las Vegas. I was always around alcohol. I was a room service waiter, at the Golden Nugget, Las Vegas Hilton. I was in the restaurant business at Black Angus restaurants I've always been around bars. I'll tell you where I have to guard myself. It's not drugs and alcohol. I don't want to drink or use, and I don't want to gamble. And I'm at a perfect weight. I struggle, Justin, with my sexual addiction. I'm a very visual and very, very tangible person. And I'm sexually attracted to women. And so I have to really stay faithful to Laura. And I'm around so many women in recovery and treatment centers and meetings. I have to be very careful. I have to guard myself. I have to put up barriers because I'm reasonably attractive. I've got a good gift of gab. I'm sober. Women like me. I mean, what's not to like, right?
Right. Yeah.
and so I'm mature. I don't get angry. I'm what girls are looking for. And I have to really guard myself because I'm attracted to a lot of these women. And there's nothing wrong with being attracted to a female. Males are visual and women are eye candy, right? From my standpoint, it's how do I treat them? How do I treat me? How do I honor my marriage? So I think if there's anything I need to guard against in my sober life, it's my sexual addiction.
Let's go there for just a second. What's the difference, or is there a difference between temptation, obsession, and craving when it comes to, well, let's sit here with the sexual addiction side of things. Temptation versus obsession versus craving.
I think if a man says he's not tempted, he'll lie about other things.
I agree 100% with that. Go ahead and continue.
And I think to deny that, like there's many women that I meet in recovery, they're knockouts. I mean, they are attractive girls. It's what do I want to do with them? That's the question, not whether or not they're attractive or they look good or I look at some women, I think, guys are just idiots. Why is this girl single? Right? And and yet I try to look at them in a sense of purity because my heart wants to be pure. My heart wants to be right. I want to look at my wife and say, I did good today. I did all right. You know, she didn't expect me to drink or use, but Laura trusts me a lot. She works full time. I'm mostly retired. I'm around women she'll never meet, right? So I have to really guard my heart, but I guard my heart by guarding my eyes, right? And so I know when someone's attractive or I'm attracted to them. It doesn't really there's some women that I'm just not attracted to, no matter how beautiful, socially beautiful they would be, but they have the right curve, they have the right this, they have the right that, and I think, man, this woman's hot. I guard myself. I think, okay, how can you view her in a way that's not going to impugn your natural desire? Uh, that is a natural desire of man, right? Because I think it's ingrained into our DNA. We have to avert our eyes. I had a spiritual advisor one time said, if if a guy doesn't look once, he's not a man. If he looks twice, he's not faithful. You know, and it's not to say that I don't uh, appreciate pretty women. I just don't look at them the same way.
And I didn't mean to take this directly all the way into sex addiction and this topic, but I think it's helpful that we sit here because, well, I identify with it greatly, and you're speaking a really good language. How do we stay away from, or how do we, when I see a beautiful woman, how do I not objectify her, turn her into an object? How do I, what are some of the thoughts that cross your mind as you go, oh, wow, she's beautiful. Now let me um, make sure I do this in a responsible, in a healthy manner, healthy way.
Well, you know, we train our eyes and we make sure our eyes are consistent with our heart. Um, and it's that consistency. It's what's down in the well, what comes up in the bucket. And so if my heart is in the proper space, my eyes are going to notify things or identify things that aren't consistent with where my heart wants to be. Right. And I think it takes time. I think it takes training. I think this is where a sponsor really, really, really comes into play. And I experienced this as part of alcohol. You know, what are my motives for being there? Right. And I learned this early on with Jack Fisher. He will be passed away in sober heaven 6 years in January of 2025. And Jack was my sponsor for 33 years. And I remember one time, Justin, when I was opening up a lot of bottles of wine at the Golden Nugget, getting ready for an event in our showroom. And to make a long story short, there came a point where I opened up a bottle of wine and every bouquet like hit me like a full head-on collision. And I went and I talked to my sponsor and I was scared that I was going to relapse. And he talked to me about motives. What are your motives for being there? What are your motives for interacting? What are your motives for doing what you're doing? And I think so much of who we are and what we're doing comes down to motive. What you know, what is my motive for being in Walmart? What is my motive for being in Macy's? What is my motive for being in Nordstrom's? You know, what's my motive for being in a lingerie store, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because I'll go in there with Laura or I'll Christmas shop and I'll go in there and I'll see all of these mannequins with scantily clad women, but I'm there. I don't care about them. I just care about what's going to look good on her, right? And so we have to, in the beginning, we have to stay away from these things because everything is a trap. Everything is a slippery slope. But as we're sober later on in our journey, and it is a journey, and we're taking the steps and we're going to meetings and we're finding out, hey, what do you do, Justin? When you're faced with this, how do you react to that? I mean, because obviously I can't stop going to the grocery store. I
Right.
need my food. I need this. I need milk. I need meat. I need, you know, how do I go to these places? Because my motive is not to look at women. My motive is to go buy food for me, right? So how do we separate what our motive is from what we will see as we are pursuing our motive?
Yeah, that reminds me of some of the, I think they're the 10th step promises. One of them that says, something to the effect of, we, if we're, we go into these places with the right frame of mind. If we're there, we can be in all sorts of places that other alcoholics may not be able to be in, and you can probably help me with that a little bit more. But these, uh, this motive, um, topic. I think I'd like to ask you a little bit about that. When somebody comes into a 12 step room, into Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time, their motive is to stop drinking. That's their motive. Whatever I need to do to stop drinking because this is killing me. At some point, sober doesn't seem to be enough, and the motive has to shift. Talk to us about that
Yeah.
shifting of the motives in the 12 step rooms.
Wow. You know what? That is so important. I call that a takeoff from Stephen Covey. Stephen did a tape called An Inside Out Approach to Quality and Change. I call it an inside out approach to recovery. So, in the beginning, coercion plays an insurmountable role. Everyone, I never met a person in my 38-year journey. I've never met a person who came to AA or another 12-step group because their life was going good. There's degrees of it being crappy, but never, the significant other says, if you do that one more time, we're done. The boss says, if you show up drunk or high one more time, I'm going to have to fire you. I know you're a good person, and so on and so forth. So, or the judge says, if you do this one more time, you're going to jail. I'm going to give you an opportunity to go in this treatment program. Go to AA, go to NA, go to SA, whatever. But if I see you again, you're not going to like the outcome. So everyone gets to recovery through coercion. That is where honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, because sooner or later, and you've seen people before who get a little physical sobriety. All of a sudden, the wife isn't as threatening, the boyfriend, the girlfriend isn't as threatening, the husband isn't as threatening. The employer says, you're a pretty good guy when you're not blah, 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 right? And so that coercion goes away. The punitive side of our actions go away. If at that point, the person isn't staying because of what is happening instead of what's not happening, they'll relapse. Guarantee you.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
Guarantee you, as much as you and I are sitting here, they're done. So at some point, I wanted to be like Eddie. I wanted to be like Jack. I wanted to be like Buddy. I just wanted to be like them. And I found out to be like them, I had to do what they did. I had to say no to the things that they were saying no to, and yes to the things they were saying yes to. Because I'm not the only one in Las Vegas who had a problem with strip clubs and scantily clad women in the casinos. There were a dime a dozen. And all the other challenges that come along, all of the other selective sobriety. Well, at least I'm not drinking. Shut up. Just just go away. Don't even bother me with that. At least I'm not sleeping with another woman. No, but you've undressed every woman that you've seen. Keep undressing them and you'll sleep with them.
Yeah. Go a little bit more and define this inside out approach to recovery that you've hijacked from Stephen R. Covey there, hijacked, that you borrowed, that you've adapted to your own
No,
purposes.
I hijacked it. You were right. I also took his version of the 4 L's: to live, to love, to learn, to leave a legacy. I hijacked that also.
Love it.
Yeah. And because Stephen talked about things that were really consistent with changing life, changing the mindset, changing the paradigm of how we think, and how we think is how we act as a byproduct of how we think, right? You know that, I know that.
Yeah, yeah.
So at some point, the inside out approach, because we're very tangible people. If I can't touch it, feel it, taste it, smell it, see it, it's not real. Right? That's why so many people struggle with the power greater than themselves, because the Bible says that Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. In the Bible, whether you believe it or not, this is what it says, that God is a spirit. Those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And we're a very, 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 let me add, a very tangible people. And so in the beginning, again, I have to get well. I have to recover, enter recovery by what is not happening to me. I can see the judge. I can see the sentence. I can see the finance company. I can see the marriage dissolving. I can see all those things. And I'm not drinking, not using, not acting out because of those things I can see. At some point, I need to flip the switch. I need to redirect, and I need to stay because of what's happening inside of me, not because of what's happening outside of me. What's outside of me will always be waiting, but what's inside of me is going to keep the outside outside. It's not going to consume me anymore. I'm generated, I'm regenerated, I'm recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I'm not reliant on what I see. I'm relying on how I feel. And everything gets processed based on how I feel. Certain foods, now that I'm healthy, I don't eat them. Laura and I are going to go out to dinner tonight, and I'm not going to eat steak because I don't like how steak makes me feel. So I'll probably have their pork chops, the other white meat, right? And last time I was at this restaurant, I ate salmon. So I know what makes the inside of me feel good based on what I take in outside of me. And what is outside of me, if it's not consistent with how I want to feel, I don't do it. I don't eat certain things past 6 o'clock at night because I know my metabolism as a 70-year-old man doesn't process things the way it used to. I don't look at women the same way because I know when I look at Laura, I don't feel faithful, right? Alcohol and drugs answer themselves. You know, my money, Laura's money, is so hard to come by. When I'm in Vegas, and I have daughters in Vegas, I have grandchildren in Vegas, I get back to their lot. I don't play the lottery. I don't play because I don't like how losing makes me feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I love this. And I recently was talking to somebody who had gone through some really difficult times in their life and had found peace with God through this process. But they said, you know what? No matter how serene I am on the inside, no matter how connected I am on the inside, life keeps on lifing. And I have to be able to accept that life keeps on lifing. And there's going to be hard things that happen no matter how connected I am, no matter how peaceful and
Yeah.
serene I am, it still happens. Any other thoughts on that?
You know, they told me early on, I had the most incredible mentors. The rooms of AA knew how sick I was. And God made sure that the right people were around to say the right things at the right time to a person who was ready to hear those things. And they told me, whatever set of problems you have today, in 6 months, you're going to have a brand new set. And we call that life.
Yeah, we do. We call that life.
And I've experienced heartache in recovery. Nowadays, because I haven't gotten that call, you know, where a grandchild is sick or died, or my son has leukemia, but those things come. Laura and I've experienced heartache, the loss of friends. When my sponsor died, it was very traumatic to me. You know, watching someone you love die of cancer. But what I have found, Justin, and I liked how you mentioned early on, we suffer from a treatable condition. And I posted today on Instagram while I was at the gym. We control the controllables. Certain things are out of my control, and I'd like to control them. You know, I had a daughter who called me yesterday and said, Josh got in a car accident. He's okay, but our van is totaled. I wanted to take that car accident away. I wanted to do some things to make her pain, make her frustration, make her financial burden less. But I couldn't do that. But what can I do? You know, I can be a good dad. I can be a good listener. So we find out what. Matter of fact, Justin, you really good point you bring up. One of the first things I do, because I talk to a lot of people and I work with them, I coach them who aren't suffering from addiction. It's obvious if a person is alcoholic, drug addict, sex addict, what have you, it's obvious what I need to attack. But a person who leads a normal life, except their life seems to be going sideways, they're hitting roadblocks or going down roads that they shouldn't be, that is not conducive to the outcome that they want. I say, what do you can, I want you to write down everything going on, every substantial, every major thing in your life. And then I want you to say whether it's controlled or uncontrollable. And I teach people through suggestion how to control the controllables. Do I want to change that which I can't control? Absolutely. I'm a control freak. But there's certain things that aren't on my side of the street, you know. And sometimes I think, God, why am I going through this? Why is this not controllable? And you can control it and you're allowing it to happen. And God just says, Robert, I got some other things I need you to pay attention to. Will you pay attention? And sometimes, Justin, there's this Joyce Landorf, she said years ago, one of the things that I remembered in my early, I was drinking and using at the time when I saw this. It was called His Undying Love. Her name was Joyce Landorf. And she talked about waiting, because that's what we're doing. We're waiting. We're waiting for something to change while we're doing what we can change. And she talked about God's waiting room. And sometimes we're just waiting. Doesn't mean we're not doing anything else. It just means certain things in our life didn't go the way we thought they would go, and we're having to wait till it's okay, or wait till God changes them, or wait till God does something, but we're waiting.
Yeah. Robert, this has been really good. Are there any other final things you'd like to wrap up with? Any other ideas that are on your mind that you just want to bring it home with before we close up here?
You know, if you're new or relatively new to the program, I know where you're at. I remember walking into the rooms for the first time and feeling so alone. And I remember thinking, if this doesn't work, what do I do? Where do I go? There was no place left for me to go. I was without a home. I was without my second wife. My mom and dad dropped me off my dad dropped me off at a motel saying, your mom and I aren't going to want you die. I was fired from a really good job. I walked out on my daughters. Um, I couldn't go in casinos because I would steal from you just to gamble. And if something didn't work, I was afraid I was going to have to die. I was 32 years old. And I looked in the mirror and I realized if something doesn't change, you're dead. So I know where you're at, but I also know where you can be. And do what we have done. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Hang in there. Find out from people like Justin and me and Michelle and others like us, others that you'll meet in the room. What did they do? They're smiling. They're telling the story that you relate to, and yet they have a smile you wish you had. Find out what they've done. Find out how they've worked the 12 steps. Find out how they're still working them. Find out if they'll be your sponsor. And just go. Don't act out. Don't drink. Don't use. And it's one of the reasons, Justin, I can tell you my sobriety date, April 25th, 1986. But if I can't tell you that I've been sober 14,081 days, then you should think, why isn't it one day at a time for this guy anymore? Do you get to a certain point where you graduate? No. I never, and I'll leave you with this, I never want to wake up tomorrow and find out this journey has actually been a destination. I never want to be perfect. I just want to get well.
Yeah. Good stuff. Robert, I don't think I have anything to add to that. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And everybody, we will be back with another Ask It Basket with Robert and hopefully Michelle next time with us also here within about the next month. We do this about once a month and it is enlightening. If you would like to get in contact with Robert, you can send an email to rico12pod@gmail.com and I will get that forwarded to Robert and get in contact with him. And you can get in contact with me the same way. Keep walking this, trudging this happy road of destiny with us, and trudge it not with like sadness or bemoaning. Press forward with purpose on this trudge. Work it. You are worth it.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my